Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. Vice grips or locking pliers. We bought a bunch of locking pliers 3 months ago and found messing with multiples we bought along the way. There's sort of two ways you can go about testing these things, and as I'm learning, people can or do sometimes use these either way. There's the adjusting and then snapping those jaws shut, or closing the jaws and then adjusting them tight. This is a simple force transducer I wired to a display here. Mechanical input, in this case squeezing or crushing, is turned into electrical signal. When testing these, you can put something in the jaws of these, then turn the force screw with the same torque each time, or you can pull on the handles with a set amount of force or simulated grip strength in this case to snap them shut. Though across all these locking pliers there are several different thread sizes, thread pitches, coatings on these adjustment screws. If your goal is the same amount of clamping load for each tool, and it doesn't have to be, I'll touch on that. Ideally, you'd have all those things equal, including thread quality in the handles, because thread friction and pitch differences create differences in output. For example, 1,559 pounds of clamp load on the Bremen, turning into 1,389 pounds on the Vice grips. And that's with the same thread size and pitch. On the other end of the spectrum, we have different thread diameters here. The finer thread locking pliers, these make 882 pounds of clamp load with the same adjustment screw input. And these have coarse threads and they feel rough, sort of gritty. Torque is used fighting that instead of adjusting that jaw tension, and we see just 227 pounds of clamping. All of these outputs from the same torque input. Now, does that difference matter? We think, well, not really. Our job as tool testers is to replicate user experience, real life inputs, and people, well, until just seeing this now, really have no idea the amount of jaw clamping load they're working with. So this method of testing works well. Some tools should benefit from their own design, making more sauce at the jaws. If this is how you adjust them for reasons of access, limited hand strength, or just habit, closing your locking pliers and then using the adjusting screw. This is how I set mine, so naturally this is what we wanted to replicate in testing today. A fixed hand gripping amount of input, which results in whatever clamping loads for each. What we really care about is things you're going to notice, like turning power, pull strength, and how annoying they are to release, as well as jaw hardness, which oddly did come into play today. Starting in order of price, the cheapest locking pliers on the day, we have the Performance Tool 10-inch locking pliers at $8.75. These are surprisingly thin and lightweight feeling, like the jaws, the body, the sheet metal that bends into shape and wraps around those jaws. It's all raising red flags in your brain telling you these aren't in fact 10-inch vice grips. By weight, you picked up the wrong pair, but they are 10-inch vice grips. It has uneven grind marks on the outside, and well, let's see how it does. Our first stop is pushy with some Schedule 40 galvanized pipe. Each one of these tests will target 38 pounds, or basically a firm, solid snap from one hand that takes some grunt. Speaking of grunt, the Performance Tool doesn't have a lot of that on tap. 19 newton meters here, we're talking 14 foot-pounds. Yeah, for your reference, that is low. The jaws are both thin and seem to not do a whole lot of digging in either. Up next in order of price is Bremen from Harbor Freight for $10. These are supposed to be their top shelf compared to other brands in the store. And well, after that last one, they do look the part. Made in Taiwan, forged chromoly jaws per its markings. More meat everywhere too. The biggest difference besides heft you're going to notice is the release lever effort. With the same clamping down on the handle's input as all the pliers will see, these took just 8.9 pounds to release them, which is not a lot. Hard to compare to the last ones, as they failed this test. It took as much as 30 pounds to release the lever, which also is going to be highest on the day, and that release lever didn't accomplish anything. They're still attached. There's literally no other lever to pull here. These things are comically bad. I sort of love finding these little nuggets. Anyways, onto the Bremen. They're not nuggets in comparison so far. Pushy is going to take this thing with the same gripping input on the pliers up to 99.3 newton meters, 74 foot-pounds. You can see the jaw grip witness marks difference pretty clearly between these two as well. Seems fairly good so far. Let's see. Up next we have the Duratech for 15 bucks, made in China and CRV now, but also look fairly decent. The adjustment screw has some coarse feeling and the jaws aren't particularly aligned as much either. That release lever takes 17.1 pounds once you adjust these in the actual tight position to match the others, which is quite a bit. The Duratech pair is going to get up to 62.1 newton meters, 46 foot-pounds, and then it free spins on from there. Next up, since we had two at $16, we wanted to try a curveball, something out of left field, a bit less curvy. These Klein Tools pliers with straight jaws. We're going to be doing pull tests coming up, as well as the current turning tests, and we were curious how this would excel at one versus the others compared to the rest of these models. These are the first example of a quick release, which means no lever release per se, but you pull on the handle itself to release the jaws, and at that, they're not bad. It took me 13.6 pounds to release them. Here's how they get on. The Klein quickly get up to 60.9, 45 foot-pounds, then quickly stop doing anything much further. Sort of as expected. This is where we expected it to do, not as well. Less teeth engagement sort of makes sense. And also at 16 bucks a piece, we have Milwaukee. This is their torque lock. They have the quick release sort of handles that the Klein just did, and also this flattened with an eye hole adjuster like those did in the handles too. More designs than ever allow you ways of tightening the adjuster further while on the workpiece, so it does make some sense to test it that way sometimes. The quick release takes a bit more force than you might assume, 15.5 pounds to release it as we measure it. Let's see how it grips. The Milwaukee gets up to about, well, not about, exactly 100 newton meters, 74 foot-pounds, which is an awful lot like the 74 that the Bremen made. They also have the same exact jaw thickness, and not to jump the gun, but in the jaw teeth hardness, which is a topic that will come into play more coming up, they measure basically exactly the same. They both advertise the same jaw material, and we're seeing 51.7 HRC and 51.8 HRC. And that's because, well, they're both made by Gongma in Taiwan. Only learned about this after seeing these mirror-like results, but apparently it's somewhat common knowledge as there's been misprints that say Milwaukee on Bremen pliers seen before. But yeah, Gongma in Taiwan makes Mac Tools locking pliers as well, Milwaukee locking pliers, a lot of the very good locking pliers you'll see coming out of Taiwan. You'd think Klein as well, but these, in this case, were made in China. So for 2/3 the price, Bremen is looking pretty good so far. Up next at $17, we have Vise-Grips. Yes, the namesake from Irwin. Well, it says the original, but I believe those honors go to Peterson DeWitt, if you can still find those, but longest running, like still made and sold, sure. These are made in Taiwan. Are they also made by Gongma? My research says maybe not. Can't be certain though. Was surprised to see Taiwan, as I've purchased a whole bunch of these years ago. They said made in China on them and they were pretty rubbish. Some of the worst all around I've used, and I don't think I have any of them left from those days. So became immediately interested in these, how they would do it. Turns out a lot better, or better than what I remember. These rack up a whole 134.2 for the best yet 99 foot-pounds. You could basically torque your lug nuts with these, just gripping onto some galvanized pipe. That's good stuff. They also took just 7.7 pounds to work the release lever. Low so far, pleasantly surprised with this change to Taiwan. Up next is the largest jump up in price. From $17 to $24, we have the Starwork True Mechanic locking pliers. These are auto adjusting, which means there's no tail adjust screw. You simply adjust the amount of jaw tension you'd like with this little reverse thread screw in the middle here. And these, most times, auto adjust to the thickness of material you're working on and just clamp on. Made in Taiwan using this patented design that they have stamped into the handle. Thick, thin, round, flat. It only keeps the tightness setting that you chose and clamps on everything else. It also has the least amount of release lever force needed yet at 6.3 pounds. It is pretty cool. Definitely wanted to include these because you can't even test them with a torque wrench input adjustment method, and these get all the way up to 109.7 with the same 38 pounds of hand clamping force. That's mighty good. And here we have Knipex.
Knipex. K-Nip-X. Knipex.
These are made in Germany from a brand usually known to knock it out of the park in pliers. They have a very low release lever effort at 7 pounds, but also some weird or different looking jaws, like the shape, thickness, lack of much curve to them. These are also 10-inch class in the same advertised capacity for those jaws, but the clamping on this pipe looks, feels, and measures as if it is an awkward experience for the tool, and frankly just doesn't get much bite going on at all. 28.2 newton meters, really poor. Ran this test again, even on a new pipe, and saw even lower. It's just sort of polishing the surface, little to no bite. Up next, we have both Channellock and Grip-On, which are $27 and $32, showing them both here because they are both made in the same factory in Spain, along with Proto Locking Pliers made in the same factory but sell for even more. They also have the same release lever effort at 15.8 pounds and 16.2 pounds as measured, and thought they would show the same turning as well, but didn't due to one difference between them, and that's jaw thickness. The Grip-On is thinner, 10.3 millimeters versus 12.8, which oddly makes the Grip-On have more turning grip. If you think about it, them having the same leverage and mechanism, the same clamping hand force input will create higher jaw PSI, like per unit of area, more bite into those thinner jaws to bite deeper. We get 69.9 from the Channellock and 74.4 from the Grip-On, we believe, because of that. We'll have to see how that works out for pull force with wider jaw area, maybe giving it the edge there. We'll see. And lastly, in the highest price spot, we have USA made Malco Eagle Grip. We bought these for $38. They are much more non-existent now since the Project Farm video because they're good and Malco is no longer making these, so it's not exactly a retail comparison at this point, or until Snap-on, who use Malco, comes out with their own replacement and is available to buy on our tool truck. These are, well, pretty sweet. Polished chrome handles, the least amount of force needed on the day to release the handles when locked on, or 6.2 pounds. And while this is not just blithering pandering to USA made tools here, these things slap. These are with the same input locking force, gripping on galvanized Schedule 40 pipe up to a massive 182.1 or 134 foot-pounds of turning before slipping. They're no joke. When it comes to pull force, or force to pull each of these off of a new spot on 1/4 inch steel plate, 10 millimeters or about 3/8 inch deep onto that plate, we were eager to see how Milwaukee and Bremen would compare again, because they are so similar, and yet Milwaukee, the only difference we found on that is that it has a sort of flat, non-cross-hatched end to the jaw versus the Bremen, which the Bremen looks to have more like teeth than those flats. This close-up with the camera put our focus out of range for the next few tools. Apologies, didn't want to redo these tests in case their numbers got worse from abuse, but the Milwaukee saw 192 pounds of force to pull it off, and the Harbor Freight Bremen a whole 320.5. I mean, for Milwaukee, it could be worse. The performance tool can't even support itself once locked on with the same 36 to 39 pound hand clamping target. 60 pounds to pull it off, and the Duratech took 138. All right, back to where we want things to be looking here. We have Klein with some results we found curious. The Klein locking pliers get up to just 190 before slipping off, and this is what we expected it to make up some ground on. I feel with straight jaws, unless the thickness of material you're working on matches the jaw position, like where they need to be in to be parallel, you're often not working with much extra here than what curved locking pliers see. It can make more sense, just seems sort of rare and dependent on what you're working on. Up next is Irwin, and the Irwin, those vice grips sort of just don't want to give up and make it to 493 pounds before slipping. That is good stuff. Starwork is no slouch either. These self-adjusting to any thickness locking pliers make it to 399.8, 400 pounds before losing grip. We're definitely on the upper end now. Well, oddly, save for Knipex, these don't do poorly, but 300 pounds with this jaw design was hoping for this to be where it made a bigger impression. Channellock and Grip-On, this is where jaw thickness comes into play. The other way around this time, the Channellock sees 399 pounds, very good. And the Grip-On with its noticeably thinner jaws, just made in the same design in the same factory, sees just 283. The Malco Eagle Grip, I mean, these felt like they wanted to bring the whole building down, ratcheting on this thing back and forth. Maybe you own a pair, maybe you'll see some for sale here and there at swap meets, like the Petersons come up once in a while, but still a very good yardstick to measure against because, man, 586 pounds, they do continue to impress. Speaking of impressing, some standouts I feel are Bremen for being as high as they are at this end of the pricing, and the Knipex for not being even that high despite being who they are, made in Germany and at this price. We find this has a lot to do with jaw hardness upon investigation. This is not something we usually or really have ever ranked with. We usually just list this as additional info, but the jaws on all these tools are big, beefy. High hardness in this case is less likely to crack and shatter for how these are used. Sure, depending on how you use them, that could be wrong, but in this case, the Knipex are simply just too soft. 36.4 HRC, you don't even need an expensive hardness gauge like ours. The chrome vanadium jaws that they advertise, which could be hardened much higher with that material, probably should be. They can be scratched by pretty much all of the other locking pliers, even budget ones, while the Knipex pliers can't really scratch any of the pliers that we own, period. I feel it's an unfortunate oversight and something they should probably work on, because these at around $26 don't compare well in their current state. Other things that stood out here was these two being basically the same hardness because they're made in the same place. That makes some sense. Like the Harbor Freight in Milwaukee, we do remove the coatings on these tools before taking measurements, as usual, even the chrome ones, of course. The performance tools were also pretty soft, comparably. And for this reason, on these tools specifically, we're awarding some ranking points, not a lot, just breaking these up into 3 categories. Hard, which all get 1s, normal hardness, which gets a placing of 2, and made too soft, which get 3s. The rest of these tests are all award rankings based on how they placed, with very similar results placing equally. And that totals a placing of 7.5 for performance tool, ouch, 3 flat for Bremen, very good, 5 flat, 4.5 for Klein, though these were straight jaw, it's sort of an experiment, 4.0 for Milwaukee, 1.8 for Irwin, 2.3 for True Mechanics, then 4 flat, another 4 flat, 4.3, and 1.0. The Malco finished first in every test metric. Those Eagle grips are mighty good, but also increasingly hard to find, followed by Irwin, True Mechanic, and Harbor Freight Bremen. These are probably the most pleasure to use, what was agreed upon here to be the nicest to use. You spend a lot less time messing with the adjusting screw, so happy we could test them today. We like them a lot. The Irwin Vise-Grip, coming back to grace, happy to see these do so much better than the ones they were making in China 5 to 8 years ago, but also not super stable in price, so I'd compare these, as these are nice to use. And speaking of price, the Bremen Harbor Freight, bringing it here and even performing from what we can measure better than the Milwaukee, made in the same place for more coin than Milwaukee. That seems to be like a win for the consumer as well. Glad to see this category is not full of junk these days. I mean, it has its junk, sure, which is always fun to watch as well, but also some real home runs. We'll include a link to Todd's great video on these below. More sources for information is always the best way to make a complete picture of any tool. We make episodes every Friday. Thank you for watching.